5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
Hello world, you're listening to Social Tech On Air with your host Clint Post. Every week you can listen to interviews with researchers, academics, professionals, and extraordinary people who are maximizing their lives with social technologies. The first 4 episodes establish a foundational understanding of the term social technologies. In short, social technologies are any technology that mediates human interaction. We live in a world where people and technologies are nearly indistinguishable from one another, and many of us can't live without them. So we might as well find a way to get the most out of life with technology. You can discover how to do that each week in this show. Listen and learn how you can maximize your life with social technologies. Thank you for listening. Now enjoy the show.
Welcome to Social Tech On Air, and this is episode 5. In this episode, I had the awesome opportunity to interview a friend of mine, a mentor, and someone who's actually helped me get this podcast off the ground. His name is Gonzales. Gonzales is the founder and the host of a very cool podcast called Outliers On Air. Outliers On Air. Go ahead and look them up if you haven't heard of them. They are in the top 10 on iTunes. They interview entrepreneurs from all over the world and tell amazing stories, things that you can learn from, things that perhaps you've experienced yourself, and you can feel really something different with this podcast than others because of the way that Ever is able to interview, the way that he's able to draw out the stories that his guests are able to share and the backgrounds that they have. Ever has a background in sales and management, particularly in the field of freight management, and he got to a point where he was able to set back and decide what he wanted to do with life, and podcasting came up. And in this interview, you get to hear about that story. It's really amazing because it shows how the technologies that we have at our grasp, in fact, a lot of the things that we probably already have in our home, empower us to go out and chase our dreams. And that's something I got from this interview, that Ever was able to go out and discover things that he didn't know existed or even that he knew he was seeking. And he was able to develop such an amazing community and has such an incredible vision for the future. And so I'm excited to share this interview with you. If you're interested in podcasting or think that you know there might be something there for you, please hit me up. I'd love to be able to share our experiences and help you avoid the pitfalls that, well, they're avoidable. So that's something that Ever has done for me in helping me, mentoring me in getting this podcast up. So I'm really grateful for him taking the time to do this episode, and I hope that you enjoy it. Really excited to have on the show with me right now Ever Gonzales, and you know, a lot of great things that we get to hear about today, and really looking forward to it. So thank you for joining me on this show, Ever.
Absolutely. I'm really excited, Clint. Thanks for the invitation. I'm happy about what you're doing. I'm excited about what you're doing. So any way we can support, we're here. Yeah,
I really appreciate that. In fact, this throw it out there right now, this show probably would be light years behind if I didn't have some of your help and guidance on this. So I really appreciate everything that you've been doing to help out.
Thanks. You did all the hard work for sure. We just had a little chat, but this is going to be awesome. So thank you for doing this.
Cool. Hey, well, let's go ahead and jump in and why don't you give us a little background on yourself and how you got into podcasting and let us know a little bit about Ever.
Sure. So I got into podcasting about 3 years ago, but before that, my entire career has been in logistics, in freight management. So, right at 2021, I got a job at a startup, at a calibration lab. I was in charge of making sure that all the transportation, everything the logistics part of it was great. And I enjoyed it. And I went from there to the Port of Long Beach to, several different companies and industries, but focusing on logistics. And I thought that was going to be my career, to the point where I even started a couple different freight management companies and ran fantastically. Was able to sell both of them. And this last one that I sold, I'm sitting around thinking, all right, I got a little bit of time on my hands now. What am I going to do with my life? Should I go start another freight company? What should I do? Should I go get a job? And as I was sitting there, I was thinking, well, I'm gonna write down all the things that I enjoy and see if we can come up with something. And so I knew that I enjoyed talking to people. I enjoyed business and startups. I enjoyed kind of being in the mix and hanging out with cool, smart people. And so after a few days, I was like, maybe we'll start a podcast. Just kind of a fun little thing where I just get to talk to people about what they're doing and some of the cool technology they're using, and then we'll just see where it goes. I wasn't expecting to turn that into a outlier or a business like we've done now. But after a little while of having some of these amazing guests on the show, it kind of got a little bit of traction, and not only was I getting better at it, but it was a lot of fun, and people were responding pretty well to it. And so we decided to kind of give it a go. And so from the podcast, we were able to kind of jump into business events and startup pitch competitions and a co-working space. And so now we've become more of a media company than anything else. So we have the podcast, we have events, we have mastermind groups, and it all started a little over 3 years ago, just because I had some time on my hands and I knew I wanted to talk to cool people. That's how Outlier On Air was born.
That's pretty cool. So it's been a little over 3 years. What was the environment in podcasting like at that time? Who were some of the big names and where did you get your inspiration?
Yeah, for sure. So 3 years ago, I mean, podcasting is still so new, right? I mean, where the mainstream still kind of is getting into it, was getting into it. But there are some veterans that have been doing it for like 10 years or so, right? But with very little fanfare. But there was a bit of an explosion 2-3 years ago with podcasting right after we got in, and so I think we got in right at the right time. But back then, I looked at John Lee Dumas with Entrepreneur on Fire, mm-hmm. Pat Flynn, and a few others. Nerdist with Chris. I was a big fan of those type of shows. Andrew Warner with Mixergy. This Week in Startups, I really enjoyed. And so they basically were talking to cool people. And I was like, I might not know anything about podcasting or recording or distributing this stuff, but I can certainly figure it out. What I have is I already know how to talk to people. I already like to talk to people. So everything else, the technical part of it, can be learned. And that's exactly what we did. I had a partner at the time, and we just kind of put our heads down and figured out the right equipment to use, the right format, how to do it properly, and all that stuff. And obviously, it's been a learning experience for the last 3.5 years, but I think we've done quite well. But when we got into it, we knew nothing about it other than we were fans of several different shows. And a lot of those shows, too, had some training and some different resources that we can kind of look to help start our own show. So if it wasn't for them, it would have been a lot harder for us to kind of get off the ground.
Yeah. So one of the cool things I like about you call new technologies is the fact that you can almost start from scratch with almost any field in technologies. There's coders that go online and learn how to code. There's people that go to YouTube and learn, well, I don't know how many things I've fixed just because YouTube had a video on it.
For sure.
And so these social technologies allows us almost an infinite amount of possibilities to go out and do something. Where did you, what kind of resources did you use in learning how to build this podcast?
Yeah, for sure. Well, we used a lot of YouTube videos, specifically when it came to equipment, what kind to use, and once we did have it, how to use it, set it up properly. So YouTube videos, and again, it was some of these podcasters that had their own tutorials, and some of it was free and some of it was, paid content. And so we paid for very little of that type of content. Everything else, either we learned on our own just by trial and error, but a lot of it was YouTube videos of these engineers and these people that had already done it. We just kind of learned bits and pieces from a lot of different resources like that, and we just kind of put it together. Now, I guess I'd consider ourselves experts now in this, but there's still so much to learn, and there's always going to be so much to learn. And unless I have somebody in house that knows how to do it, we're going to continue to go to these a lot of times these free resources online, the videos, what is it, lynda.com and places like that have this content. I mean, think about our parents, right? They had to go to school to learn a lot of the things that they learned, and me and you and especially our kids, they can have almost all of this knowledge for free if they wanted to. And that's what I like about where we are now in society with the internet and these different technologies, that if you want to truly learn how to do something, for the most part, you can find it and you can learn it for free online. And that's exciting, right? There's really no more excuses as to why you can't do something.
That's true. We get so many opportunities. It makes me wonder, what role education is going to have in the future, or how we're going to integrate technology in with that, with education, and especially as we look at it. We've got kids that are growing up in a new world, and really, if they want to do anything, they can go out and figure it out now.
Well, this technology is already disrupting the higher ed, right? I mean, I just had Tyler Richards from Northern Utah, Dev Mountain. It's a coding school, right? A code camp type of a place, and it's a 12-week course. They teach you how to code, how to do that kind of stuff, and in 12 weeks, they help place you at different companies that are looking for coders and programmers and things like that. And starting salaries anywhere from $70,000, $80,000 to $150,000 a year.
Wow.
Right. So, if I'm young, if I'm 18, 19, thinking, what am I going to do with my life? Wait, I can take a 12-week course and be specialized in this thing that's in high demand, or I can just go to a 4-year and spend all that money and figure out what's going to happen after that. Right. I mean, for the most part, most of us at that point in our lives would probably choose the 12-week course. And it's not just with programming and coding and things like that. There are those type of courses and boot camps for just about any type of industry. And a lot of it is, again, it's online or in the classroom, but using a lot of that same technology. So, yeah, I mean, our kids are going to have so many choices, which I'm excited about. It's not just going to be, hey, what school, what university am I going to go to? It's going to be, is university, first of all, the right choice for me, or should I go specialize in this because I already know that this is what I love and I can get it done faster, cheaper, with a bigger payoff. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next 15, 20 years.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be a lot of fun to see what becomes and what gets developed. So the podcast was kind of your starting point then, if I understand. You started with a podcast and then you grew into doing some other things. What was kind of the pathway there?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. At first, I didn't know. I didn't sit down and say, okay, I'm going to start a podcast and then I'm going to do the events and then I'm going to do the co-working space. In the beginning, the podcast was just something to kind of pass the time and for me to enjoy doing something while I figured out what my next step was going to be. So, yeah, it wasn't there wasn't a plan. And even after we started the podcast and even after we had a few events and even opened up the co-working space, it took us about a year and a half for me and my team to really figure out who we were and what we wanted to accomplish. In the beginning, I mean, we had plans to do a lot of different things, buy a startup bus and travel from city to city, meeting up with new entrepreneurs and things like that, to starting their own accelerator program, to different code camps. And so we were all over the place, and it took us about a year and a half, almost 2 years to truly figure out who we were. And at this point, we're a media company right now. So Outlier HQ is a media company. We have the podcasting. We're starting a podcast network, so we're inviting other podcasters to come into our network. We're going to distribute their shows for them. We're going to help them with editing if they want to. But we're building a team of podcasts that specialize and that focus on entrepreneurship. and we're going to help them distribute it. And with obviously more downloads and more views and things like that, now we're going to go to the higher agencies, higher sponsors to partner up with, because now instead of getting, $100,000 downloads for my own Outlier on Air podcast, now I have 800, 1 million downloads a month, because now I have 5, 6, 7 different podcasters in our network. So I define ourselves as a media company now, and we'll continue with events, we'll continue with pitch competitions, and mastermind retreats and those type of things. But it was messy, and we were all over the place in the beginning. Now we're more focused, and we know exactly what we want to accomplish.
Well, that's exciting.
So we just it feels like we kind of stumbled upon this, because in the beginning this was not going to be my next career move, but
right.
it grew quickly, and we got so much traction right away that it was almost a no-brainer not to do this.
Well, that's exciting. I appreciate you sharing that vision. I think that's to be able to build that network of podcasters. I found myself falling in love with podcasting just because the information is it's not like reading a blog or watching a YouTube video. There's something more real there. There's something that you just can't get in other platforms or outlets. So what's unique about podcasting? Why does it create that feeling, at least for me, and does it do it for others?
I think because there are so many different topics, so many different shows focusing on everything, right? I mean, I think you can find a podcast that focuses on anything in the world, right? If you like sports, tons of sports ones, business, things like that, gardening, and it's more of it feels like more of an intimate type of a setting, a medium, because, right, if I go to your show, I can listen to it whenever I want, and generally I have my headphones on, or my I put some in my ears to listen to your show or somebody else's show, as opposed to having it on the radio when it's playing while I'm driving and talking, right? It's almost like background noise. But podcasting, for the most part, we are all either exercising or on our laptops or on our computers listening to it with our headphones on, and it feels more intimate. We're more in tune to the words that are being said, and I don't know. It just feels like I'm more connected to a lot of the podcasts and podcasters because of that than my favorite shows on Netflix or on regular TV or things like that. It just, I feel a connection, and obviously I was the one that picked them to listen to, so I already have a little bit of an interest, and if it's a good show, I'm going to be that much more engrossed in it and connected to. So I think the future is either podcasting or something like this, right? We don't need NBC or HBO or any of those other places to continue to put out good content in order for us to be engaged, right? You, me, the regular Joe down the street that has something cool to say, it's not going to take him very much time, and it's not going to cost him very much to be able to put out content that we can relate to, if that's what we want to continue to do. So it's pretty exciting, and the audience that we have and the people that reach out to us because of our show, they're truly in. I mean, they're connected, and they love the audience or the guests that we have, and they like what we have to say, and it just makes us feel good that our hard work is being appreciated. But now, on top of that, right, we help each other, and our network continues to grow. If we have an event, these guys that already heard us on the podcast will most certainly come out to our events because they know us and they trust us at that point to be able to put on a good event because of the content that we've already had on our show. Mm-hmm. So it just kind of, it's perfect, right? I would encourage anybody that has passion about anything to start a podcast, because when I was in freight management, when I had my logistics company, it was hard for me to call the CFO or the CEO of a company and say, hey, I'd like to take you to lunch, or I'd love to spend 5 minutes with you to talk about whatever, right? But it's a whole lot and they get those kind of calls all the time. It's a whole lot easier for me now to call just about anybody and say, I would love to have you on my show. Now they're listening, right? Now they know I'm not trying to sell them something. Now they come on my show, and if I'm doing it right, we're able to connect, right? And we've had 300 and, I don't know, 55, 60 episodes that we've done. So that's 355 different entrepreneurs. And we try to connect with and stay connected to all of them. And then now they're in our network. And so, again, when we have events or we need some help or we want to do something, it's easier for me to call them or email them and say, hey, I need your help, or I would love for you to come speak at our show. Now, a whole lot more often than not, they're like, absolutely, whatever you need. And so you should do the same, and you are doing the same, Clint, but your audience as well should be able to do it. If they want to connect and be with influencers and want to grow their network, the podcast is the easiest, fastest thing to do in order to get them to the level that they want to reach.
Well, that's actually really exciting to hear. I think I'm trying to sit here thinking about what are maybe a topic or an area of interest that wouldn't fit the podcast mold, if you would. And so far, I haven't had anything come to mind.
No, right? I mean, I guess maybe like the anti-technology weirdos or something like that, right? that wouldn't fit. But truly, like I love podcasting, so I look for other shows that I personally want to listen to, and as I scroll through iTunes or Stitcher or different things like that where I want to find the different podcasts, there are topics on everything: sex, movies, cycling, anything. I don't care what it is, you can find it. And so, yeah, I think that for the most part, if your audience is interested in something, which I'm assuming most of them are interested in something, right, they can start a podcast, and they can easily, if they play their cards right and they're dedicated, they can be seen as experts or influencers in that space. And a lot of times we get calls or emails saying, I want to start a podcast. Can you help me? Absolutely. We'll help just about anybody. They're like, but I want to start making money right away. And that's not really how it works for the most part. There are some podcasters that make money because of their own podcast, but for the most part, like Outlier, we don't make money. We don't have ads on our show, and we're not looking to sell episodes or things like that for now for our own personal show. But we're making money not on our show, but we're making money because of our show, right? Just like I mentioned, it helps our audience. It helps our brand. It helps get us out there. We get invited to a lot of different conferences, me specifically, to come and speak and participate. And so because of all of those different things, that's how we make our money, but not necessarily. Nobody's paying me to put out this show, but because of it, we are able to grow our brand, and that's how we make our money. So yeah, I'm not necessarily saying that Joe down the street with his baseball podcast is going to be able to make money because of his baseball podcast, but he can certainly sell his baseball bats or his baseball cards, because of the audience that he built on that show.
Yeah, one of the unique things that the internet's provided is that interest groups are able to find a medium to connect, and they could be from anywhere around the world, and it could be the strangest thing in the world. And if there's two people that are interested in it, they can find each other now. And the podcast, I think, is another great avenue to be able to get that out there and to build a community or a tribe.
Absolutely. And if you want to go and try to build the biggest audience and have the biggest reach, you can do that, and it's going to take work and maybe some time and resources, and that's fine, right? I mean, there are those that's what they want, but if I would rather have a smaller group of dedicated listeners that are engaged with everything that we do, as opposed to a million of those that are just kind of it's okay, and don't ever engage with us. So, I mean, I don't care if you have 5 listeners or 5 million listeners. If you're engaged, if your audience is engaged and you're doing the right things, you can make it work. You can accomplish your goals that way. So it's not about the numbers; it's about the quality that you get.
Yeah, it's actually the same principle applies to if you're using social media for marketing. That you can have 1 million followers, but if they don't convert, or if they don't act on anything, then that's worse than having 100 followers that act on everything.
For sure.
Well, what are some of the tipping points that you experienced with the podcast? For example, when you started another outlet, or got invited to a big show, what were some of those moments, and what were I like to quantify things. For example, maybe you reached 20,000 downloads in a day, or whatever, and those kind of points of success.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question. As I look back, I'm trying to think of when it was, and obviously there was a tipping point. I'm trying to figure out what happened, or when it was, and I can't really pick a time or what really happened, other than when we truly took this seriously and we were consistent with our work, not just with the schedule, right, of when and how we put out our episodes, but the quality, right? So there are a lot of shows that pump out a ton of different interviews or different shows, but when we started focusing on the quality of our guest and the actual interview and the actual show, I think that's when other people started to take it seriously. So we were consistent and we were focused on quality. That's when I don't even know. That's when people started taking us. I started inviting us to other conferences to participate in their conferences. When they started inviting us to speak, and even take our own show and set up a mobile studio at their conference to interview a lot of their guests, a lot of their VIPs, a lot of their keynote speakers. And of course, as we know, once one group does that, then it's easier for a lot of other groups to do that. So if I had to pick, it would be when we got serious, when we were consistent, and when we took the quality of the show seriously.
Yeah.
And so this was almost a year into it, and we were pumping out 5 shows a week, right? And it took us about a year to get to that point where, I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but when we were legit, right? When other podcasters and other businesses and other conferences started to look at us like, hey, these guys are onto something, or actually are doing something that's worthwhile. And so, yeah, it was almost a year.
What did you learn in that year's time, as far as like what meant quality and what didn't, and how did you figure that out?
Yeah, well, again, it was engagement, right? That's how we're able to judge if we're just kind of putting stuff out there and nobody cares about, or if we're putting content out there that people can relate to and engage with. And so it was when we stopped chasing big names, right? Because everybody wants to have the Mark Cubans of the world, the Gary V's, those kind of guys on their show. And not that we just don't go after them because everybody's going after them. When we started focusing on the story, right? And we interview entrepreneurs from all over the world, ones that just got started, ones that are like serial entrepreneur, mid-career type of guys, and ones that are already retired and are kind of giving back. And so I don't really care who they are, where they're from, as long as they have a good story to tell, right? Whether it's good, bad, or ugly, right? We don't want just success stories and only focus on that. We try to get in deep and talk about the times that, they lost their first company, or, how they were able to run their company when they had a death in the family. Like those are messy things. And when we kind of focused on stories is when it all changed, right? It wasn't just about downloads and numbers and the biggest names. When we actually focused on the quality, truly, it was almost like a switch. Everything else started falling into place. Like, oh, wait, we weren't worried about making the most money at that point. We weren't worried about getting on the iTunes charts, right? The top 10, the top 100, or whatever. We just kind of went back and said, okay, now let's just focus on putting out stories that our audience wants to hear. And that's when the switch was kind of went on, and we were like, oh, wait, this is a real thing, right? I mean, we're helping entrepreneurs through the stories of the guests that we have, right? Somebody comes on and says, I did this, it was stupid, I wouldn't recommend it. And somebody that's listening to it is probably in a similar situation. They can learn from that. And, we've heard stories and we've had emails and phone calls of people that were like, hey, I heard so-and-so on your show, and when he said this, it clicked. And so I did the opposite, or I did similar thing that they did, and it helped me or whatever. And so that's the kind of stuff that we like. And I know it sounds corny, and I know that, it's all like, we all say these things, but that's when it truly changed for us. And since then I focus on not the name, but the background and the story of all of our guests. And if you go through our list, there'll be some names that you recognize, but there are going to be a whole lot of other names that you don't recognize. But if you listen to the show, you'll know that these guys and gals are onto something cool, and they all have a history, and a history that we can learn from.
I was going to ask what was the biggest name of that you've been able to interview, but then I figured that the second question following up to that would be, what was your most downloaded episode? And I imagine it probably be two different things.
Yeah, it actually is, right? Because I'm not going to mention any names, but we've had a few decent names, and they're not necessarily the best episodes, right? I mean, you might recognize the name, but they're not necessarily the best either interviewees, or aren't in a position where they care to share as much as some of our other guests. And so, we've had Andy Weir, so he's the author of The Martian. Last year with that Martian movie that came out, he was a pretty big deal. Jermaine Dupri, the hip hop mogul, and a few other. Let's see, we've had some ex-NFL players. Jerome Sapp, that's played in the NFL. Now he's a serial entrepreneur. We've had a bikini model turned entrepreneur that had a pretty great following, and so those were cool, and they were exciting to have. But some of the best ones have been like Kiara Mizuko, right? Probably not a name you recognize, but her story is amazing. So I recommend that you go and you look that one up. Sarah Hearing with Nail Snaps, Ariel Jalali, Peter Horan. These names, not necessarily household names, but they are incredible people, great stories that they've told on our show, running some pretty cool companies. And I'm cool with that, right? If Gary Vee's team comes and say, hey, would you want to interview him? Absolutely, we'll interview him. But I've stopped chasing the big names, and now I'm chasing the great stories, and that's made all the difference with our podcast.
Well, that's exciting to hear. It makes me think about kind of the history of, there's a saying that history repeats itself, and all technologies are social technologies in a sense. But, I've been considering lately how podcasting is kind of like the return of the radio storytelling, when the family would gather around the radio, and that was their only form of entertainment before TV and movies, moving pictures. But it was the stories that were told that were captivating, and it sounds like we're figuring that out with podcasting now.
For sure. And I'm not the best storyteller, right? If I had an hour to fill and I had to tell stories, I'm sure they'd be okay. But I think what my talent is being able to relate to and connect to my guest, and ask questions that make them feel comfortable, where they tell their own story. And I'm able to kind of help guide and facilitate that whole thing. So yeah, it's all about the story. Definitely all about the story.
That's
so
cool.
I would agree with you.
Well, there seems to be, I like to identify principles, things that are applicable not just in any one field, but across multiple professions and areas. And one of them that I'm curious about is what principles you might be experiencing or identifying in landing the interview with, say, networking. Networking seems to be a big thing. So when you're out meeting people to interview for the podcast, so there's some things that you've learned that help you network outside of podcasting?
Yeah, I mean, and again, this is stuff that your audience already knows, and I'm just gonna repeat what I see and what I've done, but uh, and some of it's gonna sound maybe cliche, but being yourself first of all, right? I'm not trying to be the cool guy podcaster or the most famous or wealthiest entrepreneur, because I'm not those things, right? I go out there and I try to be myself and I try to be real, and I try to find other people that are like that, right? That are, maybe they are multimillionaires with a string of very successful startups that they've had, but they're down to earth and they're willing to connect. And when it comes to networking, I just I don't know that there is a technique or too much thought put into that for me. It just kind of happens automatically, right? I'm talking to different people. Sometimes we click, sometimes we don't, which is fine. Other times I'm just chit chatting and find this person very interesting, so I continue to ask questions. And the more I'm interested in them, the more they open up, and the more we were able to connect. And so for me, I think I'm lucky because I really truly enjoy people. I truly enjoy hearing about who they are, what they do, what they think about certain topics. And if it's interesting to me, then I assume that it's going to be interesting to our audience. I mean, we've proven that over and over again. And so those are the people that I invite to our show. But not just that. It can be anybody doing anything. If I find somebody is cool at a conference or at a networking event and that I like, I try to stay in touch, and not because I want something out of them, right? I mean, a lot of times we invite them to the show, but sometimes just because I like them and I want to learn more about them, and I take them out to lunch or things. And I don't always have an ask. I don't always try to get something from them. I just try to learn as much as I can from them, and so that has worked for me. So being real, right? Not trying to be somebody fake or somebody that I'm not, and finding like-minded people, and then being curious about their story has helped me be able to not just grow our brand Outlier, but I've been able to grow my own network of entrepreneurs and friends because I want to know more about them, and I'm not looking for them necessarily to always come on my show, or I'm not looking for them to buy my products or my services. I just want to be around cool, smart people. And because of that, we're able to reach more individuals when it is time for us to try to sell something or offer a service or invite them to a conference. Now it's a friendship as opposed to, hey, you're cool, want to come to my event, or hey, you're cool, want to buy my product. I think we're all way too smart for that, and we can smell it, see that coming from a mile away.
Yep. I'd like to move on to a more personal side of things outside of the professional, what you do in with the Outliers, and dig a little bit deeper into your own personal uses of social technologies. So I'm curious, what social technologies do you use in your professional and personal life?
Yeah, so right now, I mean, I think like most people, social media, quite a bit of it, not just to kind of get lost and kind of check out, but because for me, it's part of my business, right? So I use that quite a bit, and that's where I get, personal enjoyment, seeing my friends and seeing people that I follow and things like that. But that's where I learn. I learn anything really. You can find articles on just about anything through social media or different websites and articles that are out there. So for me, it's a place for me to be able to grow and develop and stay in touch and stay connected to a lot of the people that I want to stay connected to.
Yeah, how do you navigate the times when the kitten videos or when those pop up, or you start chasing rabbit holes?
And you know what, it happens, right? And it's still something that I'm trying to perfect, right? I mean, it's fine. Those cat videos and all that stuff are just getting lost and zoning out in these stupid things that we can find online, and there are a ton, right? Games or videos and things like that. And I like to go in I like to manage my time, so I'm getting better at this, where I say, for the next 2 hours, all I'm going to do is this, right? Whether it's editing or write an article or whatever it is, and I don't let anything else distract me. Not a text, not a phone call, not a stupid video, not a friend pinging me on Facebook, none of that for 2 hours. You know, I'm not a surgeon, so nothing for the most part is life-threatening in my life right now. Nobody's going to die if I don't answer that phone call for the most part. So I don't, right? So it's 2 hours. And then I give myself half an hour or so to reply to emails and text and maybe surf the net or things like that. And then I go back another 2 hours. Either I'm at a meeting or a lunch meeting, and I try not to do anything else. And then I give myself another half an hour or so. And so that's how I break up my day, being able to do those things in order to stay sane. Because, I mean, even now, there are still days when I feel like I've been working for, 5, 6, 7 hours, but I look back and I'm like, I didn't accomplish a dang thing, right? I mean, I was too busy reading this article or playing a video, whatever, right? And so it still happens, but I try to put it in little chunks, little slots, and that's helped quite a bit.
Oh, that's good. I like those ideas.
But it's addicting and it's difficult, and again, I don't always succeed, but I at least now I have a pattern.
Gives you some kind of level of accountability.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
What I get thinking about how much we're able to accomplish with technology, and before technology. Can you contrast that? What was your potential amount of work that you were able to accomplish before, let's say, the internet and some of these computers versus now?
Yeah, I don't. It's hard to tell because it was different kind of work,
mm-hmm.
right? I mean, if I'm focused, I think if we were able to compare it side by side, I'd be able to accomplish more now, just because I would have more resources to accomplish whatever I was trying to accomplish, right? But back then, there were fewer distractions, but also less resources as available as we have them now. So again, I think now it's a matter of staying focused and knowing what our end goal is or what we're trying to accomplish. Because when we don't, we can go off and do a bunch of nothing for 7 hours, 8 hours. So it's better, obviously it's better now, just because there's so much in front of us that we can choose from to help us. But the downside is the same thing. There's so much in front of us that we can choose from. Now we just have to be disciplined, and I'm still working on that.
Yeah, I think we most definitely are. All of us are trying to figure that out. So as a husband and father, let's see, you've got how many kids?
I have 3 kids.
3 kids, and how old? Can I ask?
Yeah, 9, 6, and 5.
9, 6, and 5. And well, this is a question that I really enjoy learning about, because I have a little girl that's almost 2, so I want to take in all the information and get on how to navigate raising kids in a world where you're drowning in technology.
For sure. Yeah, that's if they see me on my phone or on my laptop or any of that stuff all day long, then that's what they're gonna know, and that's what they're gonna do. And so we try to limit that. Actually, we don't try. For them, there's a definite limit as to how much screen time, whether it's a TV or a computer or an iPad they have. And so it's anywhere from half an hour to an hour every day for them, right? They don't. There's nothing pending or nothing that they need to be on the computer for more than an hour. And even then, sometimes we break it up into little chunks. But yeah, we've been pretty good at with them not being online or playing video games as much, just because there's so many other things to explore and so many other things to do. And luckily we're pretty outdoorsy, so we're always out hiking or at the park or just taking a walk. And so as of right now, they're still young enough where they can certainly do more if they want, if we let them, but they're to the point where, they're not 16, 17 asking for an iPhone and wanting to be online all the time. I'm sure that conversation is going to come, but not yet. So for us, we limit the time that we have in front of a screen, any screen. Again, for us as parents, but definitely for them. I don't want them zoning out in front of a computer all day long, watching stupid, dumb videos. It's not helpful. And some of the screen time that they do have, like for my youngest, my 5-year-old, he has a program that he does there that it's helping him count and read and things like that. And where I'm obviously that's a resource that I want to be able to use because we have that technology, so we take advantage of it. Or my oldest learning a new language, right, on the computer. Awesome, let's do it. But they're not going to do it for 4 or 5 hours every day. But they do have some time to be able to do those things.
That's good. So do you distinguish between like mindless activities and resources, educational type stuff, and try to direct them more towards that when they're on the screen?
Yeah, we try to, we will as a family be ridiculous and watch YouTube videos, right, on our flat screen, just Googling different random things and laughing at it or whatever, learning from it. But yeah, for the most part, the screen time that they do have is for them now is more educational. Again, as they get older, they're going to want to have a little bit more fun. But and they're never on it by themselves. There's always somebody with them easily, right? They can navigate from whatever they're doing resource-wise, learning-wise, to bad things on the internet. And so they're too young for that yet. And so we keep close eye on it.
Yeah. That's good. I can imagine that might be sometimes hard if they have some friends that with different with parents that maybe hold a different standard. And
for sure.
So
and at that point, I know this isn't that type of podcast, but at that point now it's just your parenting style and the things you've been able to teach them, right? Because easily they can be with a friend, especially my 9-year-old that has his own phone, and he does have friends that have their own phones with internet access and things like that. And so at that point, hopefully he's listened to us and has heard the fact that we don't want him on there unsupervised. And so at that point, we're hoping he remembers what he was taught at home.
Yeah. Well, it's exciting times, and we get to learn a lot as we go along, don't we?
Absolutely, every single day.
What's some of the resources you mentioned? YouTube, Linda. Do you have some other resources that you like to use for organizing and furthering your education and skills?
For education and skills, I mean, other podcasts for sure. This Week in Startup, I enjoy quite a bit. It's in depth. Mixergy, I really enjoyed, like we mentioned. So yeah, the YouTube, some of these other podcasts, but even just random articles on like Forbes or Inc. magazine, things like that. Every single day, there's something that I learn, and I try to find that, or else I feel like it's a bit of a wasted day if I didn't read an interesting article with something that I can apply in either my personal life or my business life. And so yeah, it's and it's great because it's endless. But now we just have to figure out when to stop it. It can consume us easily.
Right. Well, we're gonna move on to the last segment of our show, and this is the part where we geek out. So there's two questions. The first one we're going to ask: as you were growing up, what was your favorite technology?
Sheesh, not much. Let's see. Just I guess the thing I can think of is the TV. I mean, if you can count that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I grew up in Southern California. We were poor. We didn't have much money for anything else, but we did have a TV, and for a long time it was the TV, and then eventually, it was like Atari and things like that. So some of the video games, but yeah, no, I mean, all my information, the good and the bad, I received it through television, the shows that I watched, and that's what stands out when I think back of the technology that I either enjoyed or had the most of as a kid.
Yeah. Did you enjoy the Saturday morning cartoons?
I wasn't a big fan of the Saturday morning cartoons for some reason, but I thought maybe they were a little too childish, even back then. But there were some I enjoyed. I don't know, He-Man and G.I. Joe and things like that. But I also enjoyed sports, so I watched anything that had to do with the ball. I was watching it, from football to soccer to baseball. I spent a lot of time in my youth in front of the TV looking at sports, watching sports.
Yeah. Well, the second part of the question then is, what future technology are you most excited for?
Oh man, there's so many. I like the self-driving cars, right? I'm looking for that to really hit the masses and see what happens because of it. I mean, how are our lives going to be better because of it? Am I going to be able to sit and read as I'm driving down the road? I hope so. I don't know, but I'm excited to see where that's going to go. Anything that has to do with clean energy, obviously, it would be cool. What's some of the like virtual reality stuff, right? Mm-hmm. Augmented reality. That could be interesting. Is interesting, and it's definitely is here to stay. And so, I'm just thinking about video games. I'm thinking about training. I'm thinking about all these different things that we're going to be able to do with it, as easily as we are able to do with it. With how we get online, I think it's going to be that easy and that accessible to train soldiers, right, in a virtual battlefield, or learn how to fly a plane, or anything really. And so that's pretty exciting. I'm really excited about that. Artificial intelligence, I'm excited about, but a little scared of too. Right? I mean, is this going to be? Are they going to take over and kill us, or is it going to be one of those things where it makes our lives easier and better?
Yeah.
So I don't know. So yeah, it's a bunch of different things that I'm looking forward to, and I hope that I'm around long enough to see some of these things become as big and as wide and as impactful as the internet was for our generation, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, Ever, I really appreciate you doing this episode. I think we pulled out the power of podcasting and how it can expand our networks, and then the way to arrange our time and to be able to focus in on certain tasks at hand and to improve our use of technologies. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience on how to maximize their lives with new and old technologies?
No, just there's nothing that can stop you, right? If you truly want to do something, the technology is out there, and you can definitely do it. So no more excuses. That's
awesome. Thank you, Ever, and looking forward to catching you on the next episode.
Absolutely, Clint. Hey, this is cool. I really wish you much success, and thank you for being such a great host.
Thank you so much. You have a nice afternoon now.
Open angle bracket / HTML close angle bracket.